What would you do if a 13-year-old girl with mismatched socks claimed she could bring your voice back? And she was right. The rain hammered against the windows of St. Mary's Speech Therapy Center on Magnolia Street that Tuesday morning. Not the gentle kind that whispers promises of spring, but the relentless downpour that makes you question whether the sun will ever return. People hurried through the sliding glass doors, shaking water from their coats, clutching appointment cards, and hope in equal measure. They moved with the careful urgency of those carrying fragile dreams. But one person sat perfectly still. She perched on a worn blue chair in the corner of the waiting room, a thick hardcover book balanced on her knees. Her name was Luna Martinez, and at 13, she had the kind of eyes that seemed to hold more stories than most adults would ever read. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy bun secure with what appeared to be a pencil, and her socks, one striped purple and green, the other solid yellow, peeked out from beneath faded jeans. She wasn't there for therapy. She came every Tuesday after school, settled into that same chair, and simply listened to the conversations, to the silences, to the things people said, without words. The receptionist, Mrs. Chun, had stopped asking questions weeks ago. Luna never caused trouble, always had a book, and somehow made the waiting room feel less like a place of broken dreams and more like a library where healing lived between the pages. Across the room, near the children's play area, sat Marcus Thompson, 42 years old, broad shoulders that had once carried the weight of construction crew's expectations, now slumped forward as if the world had become too heavy. 3 months ago, he'd been shouting instructions over the roar of machinery, laughing with his crew over lunch, singing off-key in his truck on the way home to his wife and twin boys. Then came the accident, the beam that shouldn't have fallen, the surgery that saved his life but stole his voice. The doctor said the damage to his vocal cords was severe, not impossible to overcome, but the road back would be long, uncertain, filled with frustration. His wife, Sarah, sat beside him, scrolling through her phone with the determined distraction of someone trying not to think about medical bills and mortgage payments. Their 8-year-old twins, Jake and Danny, sat on the carpeted floor, half-heartedly pushing toy cars around a wooden track. They kept glancing at their father, waiting for him to make the vrooming sounds he used to make, but Marcus just stared at his hands. Luna watched him from behind her book, a collection of poetry she'd found at a yard sale. She saw the way Marcus's jaw tightened every time someone called his name, the way his sons kept looking at him with confusion that was slowly hardening into something that looked like loss, the way Sarah's smile had become a performance, bright and brittle as glass. When the speech therapist finally called Marcus's name, he stood slowly, like a man walking to his execution. Luna watched him disappear down the hallway, watched his family settle in for another hour of waiting and hoping and pretending everything would be fine. She closed her book and stood up. "Excuse me," she said quietly to Sarah. Sarah looked up, surprised. "Oh, hi, sweetie. Are you waiting for someone?" Luna shook her head. "I wanted to tell you something about your husband." Sarah's eyebrows lifted. "I'm sorry, do we know you?" "No, ma'am, but I've been watching him come here for weeks, and I think I can help him find his voice again." Sarah blinked slowly. "I'm sorry, what?" Jake and Danny had stopped playing, and were now staring up at the strange girl with mismatched socks. Luna tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I know it sounds crazy, but my grandmother taught me about voices, how they work, how they hide, how they come back. She said some people just need someone to listen in the right way." Sarah glanced toward the hallway where Marcus had disappeared. Then back at Luna. "Honey, that's very sweet, but my husband is working with professionals. He's been through surgery. He's doing exercises. And it's not working," Luna said gently. "Not because the doctors are wrong, but because he's afraid." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Sarah's carefully maintained composure cracked just slightly. "Afraid of what?" "Of sounding different, of disappointing you, of his boys hearing him try and fail." Luna's voice was soft but certain. "Sometimes the voice isn't broken. Sometimes it's just hiding." Jake tugged on his mother's sleeve. "Mom, who is she?" Sarah looked down at her son, then back at Luna. "I don't know, baby." Luna knelt down so she was at eye level with the twins. "I'm Luna. I come here to listen to people. Your dad has one of the strongest voices I've ever heard, even when he's not making any sound. Danny, the braver of the two, leaned forward. How can you hear him if he's not talking? Luna smiled, because voices aren't just about talking. They're about the way someone sits, the way they look at the people they love, the way they breathe when they're thinking hard about something. Your dad's voice is still there. It's just scared to come out. Sarah felt something shift in her chest. Not quite hope, but not quite skepticism either. And you think you can help with that? My grandmother used to help people who'd lost their voices. Not doctors or therapists, just someone who knew how to listen to the quiet parts. She taught me before she passed last year. Luna stood up, brushing off her knees. I'm not asking for money or anything. Just one chance to try something different. Sarah looked toward the therapy rooms again. Marcus had been going 3 times a week for 2 months. The exercises were helping his throat heal, but no sound had come yet. Nothing but whispers and frustration, and the gradual dimming of the man who used to fill their house with laughter. What exactly are you proposing? Sarah asked carefully. Meet me at Riverside Park tomorrow after school. Bring your husband and the boys. Give me an hour. Luna picked up her book and slung her backpack over one shoulder. If it doesn't help, you never have to see me again. Before Sarah could respond, Luna was walking toward the sliding doors. She paused and looked back. Mrs. Thompson, your husband's not broken. He's just forgotten how strong his voice really is. Then she was gone, leaving Sarah with a business card that had appeared somehow in her hand. It was handmade with careful cursive writing. Luna Martinez, professional listener. That evening, Sarah sat across from Marcus at their kitchen table while the boys did homework in the living room. She turned the card over in her fingers, trying to find the words to explain what had happened. Marcus watched her with patient eyes. He'd gotten good at reading faces since his voice disappeared. Sarah's expression told him she was wrestling with something. Finally, she looked up. A girl at the therapy center today said she could help. Marcus raised an eyebrow. I know how it sounds. She's maybe 13, wears mismatched socks, carries poetry books. Sarah's voice got softer. But Marcus, she knew things. About you, about us, about how you've been feeling. And the boys. She glanced toward the living room. They lit up when she talked to them. Really lit up for the first time in months. Marcus leaned back in his chair. He picked up the pen they kept on the table for his notes and wrote, What kind of help? Sarah slid the card across to him. She wants to meet us at the park tomorrow. Says her grandmother taught her about voices, about helping people who've lost them. She paused. Marcus, what if she's right? What if you're not broken, just scared? Marcus stared at the card for a long time. Then he wrote, Scared of what? Sarah reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. Of sounding different than before. Of us hearing you struggle. Of the boys seeing you as less than the dad who used to sing them to sleep. Marcus's eyes filled with tears he'd been holding back for months. Sarah squeezed his hand. You're still their hero, voice or no voice. But maybe it's time to try something different. He nodded slowly and wrote, 1 hour. Riverside Park was the kind of place where families came to remember what normal felt like. A playground with swings that actually worked. A small pond where ducks gathered to judge the quality of breadcrumbs. And plenty of open space for throwing footballs and flying kites, and pretending that the world outside the park gates wasn't complicated. Luna was already there when the Thompson family arrived, sitting cross-legged on a blanket under an old oak tree. She had a different book today, something thick with a worn cover, and a small canvas bag beside her. Jake and Danny ran ahead, suddenly energetic in a way they hadn't been in months. Luna, Danny called out. You came. She looked up and smiled. Of course I came. I always keep my promises. Marcus walked slower, Sarah's hand in his. He looked nervous but determined, like a man preparing to jump off a cliff with the hope that he might learn to fly on the way down. Luna stood as they approached. Hi, Mr. Thompson. Thank you for trusting me. Marcus nodded and gave a small wave. Can I tell you what I think is happening? Luna asked gently. You don't have to agree, just listen. He nodded again. Luna sat back down on the blanket and gestured for them to join her. My grandmother used to say that voices are like rivers. Sometimes there's a storm or a landslide or something that blocks the flow. The water doesn't disappear. It just needs a different path. Jake plopped down beside her. What kind of storm happened to Dad? Luna looked at Marcus, asking permission with her eyes. He nodded slightly. A scary kind, she said. The kind that makes you worry about whether people will still love your voice if it sounds different than before. Danny moved closer to his father. We'll still love Dad's voice. I know you will, Luna said. But sometimes grown-ups forget that kids love them no matter what. They get so worried about being perfect that they forget being real is better. Sarah felt tears building behind her eyes. Luna opened her canvas bag and pulled out what looked like a small wooden recorder. This was my grandmother's. She used to use it to help people practice making sounds when they were afraid to use their real voice first. Marcus looked skeptical. It's not magic, Luna said quickly. It's just easier sometimes to make music before you make words. Less pressure. She held it out to him. Would you try? Marcus hesitated, then took the instrument. It was warm and smooth, worn by years of use. Just breathe through it, Luna said. Don't worry about making a tune. Just let the air make whatever sound it wants to make. Marcus looked at his family. Sarah nodded encouragingly. The boys were watching with the kind of intense attention they usually reserve for Christmas morning. He lifted the recorder to his lips and breathed. A soft, breathy note emerged. Not strong, not perfect, but definitely sound. Jake's eyes went wide. Dad, you made music. Marcus stared at the recorder like it had performed an actual miracle. Try again, Luna said softly. This time, don't think about it. Just breathe and let whatever wants come out, come out. Marcus tried again. This time, a slightly stronger note, followed by another. Not a melody exactly, but definitely intentional sound. Danny clapped his hands. Do it again. For the next 20 minutes, Marcus experimented with the recorder. At first, just single notes, then small patterns, then something that almost resembled a tune. His family sat around him, completely absorbed, like they were witnessing something sacred. Luna watched quietly, occasionally offering gentle suggestions. Try breathing from deeper in your chest. Let the sound be imperfect. Your voice doesn't have to be the same as before to be beautiful. Finally, Marcus lowered the recorder and looked at Luna with something that might have been wonder. How do you feel? She asked. Marcus opened his mouth, and for the first time in 3 months, a sound came out. Not words yet, just a rough, breathy aw. But it was his voice. Sarah gasped. The boys practically levitated with excitement. Dad! Jake shouted. You did it! Marcus tried again. Aw. Then barely audible, but definitely there. Boys! Danny and Jake threw themselves at their father, who caught them in a hug that lifted them off the ground, over their heads. He looked at Luna with tears streaming down his face. Thank you, he whispered, the words rough but real. Luna smiled and started packing up her bag. Your voice was always there, Mr. Thompson. It just needed permission to be different. Sarah wiped her eyes. How did you know? Luna slung her bag over her shoulder. My grandmother always said that healing isn't about going back to how things were. It's about finding new ways to be whole. She looked at the family, still tangled together in their hug, Marcus's voice growing stronger with each whispered word to his sons. Same time next week? She asked. Marcus nodded, his voice cracking as he said, Yes, please. Over the following weeks, their sessions in the park became a routine. Luna would bring different instruments, a small drum, a harmonica, a set of bells, anything that let Marcus experiment with making sound without the pressure of making words. Gradually, as confidence grew, the whispers became speaking voice. The single words became sentences. The sentences became conversations, then stories, then laughter. But more importantly, the family began to remember what they sounded like together. One afternoon, about a month into their meetings, Marcus arrived at the park alone. Luna looked up from her book. Where is everyone? Marcus sat down on the blanket beside her. Sarah took the boys to get ice cream. I wanted to talk to you by myself. His voice was still raspy, still different than before, but it was strong and clear and unmistakably his. What's on your mind? Luna asked. Marcus was quiet for a moment, picking at the grass. I keep wondering why you helped us. A 13-year-old kid with no reason to care about a stranger's problems. Why? Luna closed her book and looked out at the pond where a family of ducks was practicing formation flying. Can I tell you about my grandmother? Marcus nodded. Her name was Esperanza. She came to this country when she was my age, speaking no English, scared of everything. She lost her voice for almost 2 years, not physically, but she just stopped talking, stopped believing anyone would want to hear what she had to say. Marcus listened intently. One day, an old man at the market heard her humming while she shopped. Just humming, because she thought no one was listening. He told her she had the most beautiful voice he'd ever heard, and that it would be a shame to keep it hidden. Luna smiled at the memory. She said that was the day she decided to use her voice to help other people find theirs. And she taught you? She taught me that everyone has a song inside them, even when they can't hear it themselves. Sometimes you just need someone to sit with you until you remember the melody. Marcus felt that familiar tightness in his throat, but this time it wasn't from injury. Luna, you gave me my family back. Luna shook her head. Your family never went anywhere. I just help you find a new way to reach them. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the ducks practice their formations. Finally, Marcus spoke again. What happens now? I mean, with you? Do you have other people you're helping? Luna picked up her book and showed him the cover. It was a journal, not a novel. The pages were filled with her own handwriting. I'm writing down the stories. All the people I meet, all the voices I help find. Abuela always said that stories are how we remember that we're not alone. Marcus looked at the journal with new respect. Am I in there? You and your family. Yes. But don't worry. I changed the names, keep people's privacy. It's not about the details. It's about the hope. Marcus nodded. You know, I went back to work last week. Luna's eyes lit up. How did it go? Different than before. My voice is different. So I have to be different too. But the crew, they listen when I talk now. Really listen, instead of just waiting for their turn to speak. He laughed, and the sound was rough but genuine. Turns out almost losing something makes you appreciate it more. And the boys, Marcus's whole face softened. They ask me to sing to them every night now. Not because my voice is perfect, but because it's mine. Sarah says it's the most beautiful sound in the world. Luna smiled. Your grandmother was right. Healing isn't about going back. It's about moving forward. As if summoned by their conversation, Sarah and the twins appeared at the edge of the park, waving and calling out greetings. Marcus waved back, his voice carrying clearly across the distance as he called their names. Luna watched the family reunion with a satisfied expression of someone who had witnessed a small miracle. Luna, Marcus said as they walked toward his family, what do you want to be when you grow up? She considered the question seriously. I think I want to keep doing what I'm doing now, listening to people, helping them find their voices, maybe become a real therapist someday, but not the kind who sits in an office, the kind who meets people where they are. Marcus nodded. The world needs more listeners. The world needs more people willing to be heard, Luna replied. Even when their voice shakes, even when they sound different than they used to, even when they're scared. That evening, Luna sat at her desk at home, writing in her journal by the light of her bedside lamp. On the page, she wrote, Marcus Thompson remembered his voice today, not the old one. That voice belonged to the man he was before. This is a new voice, maybe quieter, maybe rough around the edges, but braver somehow. It's a voice that has survived something and chosen to keep singing. His boys don't care that it sounds different. They just care that it's there, calling their names, telling them stories, promising to love them no matter what. Sometimes I think that's all any of us really want. Someone to hear us, even when we're not sure what we're trying to say. She closed the journal and looked out her bedroom window at the street below. Tomorrow she would go back to the therapy center, back to her blue chair in the corner, back to listening and watching and occasionally, when the moment was right, stepping forward to remind someone that their voice mattered. Because Luna Martinez had learned something important from her grandmother. Healing happens not in grand gestures or medical miracles, but in the quiet moments when one person really hears another. When someone sits with you in your silence and helps you remember that you have something worth saying. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you get to be the person who reminds someone else that their voice, changed or unchanged, perfect or imperfect, is exactly what the world has been waiting to hear. The rain had stopped falling on Magnolia Street. In its place, the first tentative rays of spring sunshine were beginning to break through the clouds, and Luna could hear the sound of voices, talking, laughing, healing, drifting from the therapy center below. She smiled and reached for her book. Tomorrow, there would be more stories to witness, more voices to help find their way home. But tonight, she would read poetry and remember her grandmother's words. Mija, every voice is a gift. Sometimes people just need someone to help them unwrap it. There are people in this world who understand that healing isn't always about fixing what's broken. Sometimes it's about finding new ways to be whole. They know that voices come in many forms, and that the most important thing isn't how you sound, but that you're brave enough to make any sound at all. Sometimes the youngest among us carry the oldest wisdom. Sometimes a 13-year-old with mismatched socks and a grandmother's journal knows exactly what a grown man needs to hear to remember who he is. If this story moved you, listen a little more carefully to the people around you. And if you know someone who has lost their voice, literally or figuratively, remind them of this. Your voice matters, even when it shakes, even when it's different than before, even when you're not sure anyone wants to hear it. The world is waiting for the sound only you can make.